Welcome. We're opening up the archives today to undertake a major examination of a figure whose creative career spanned just a single explosive decade, but really redefined global style forever.
Correct.
Christian Dior.
It is truly one of the most remarkable stories of post-war success. Our mission today is to thoroughly examine the available source material, focusing on the fascinating details of Dior's life, his, wholly unexpected path into haute couture,
Right.
the revolutionary moment of the new look, and crucially, the intense, complex life of the man behind a global empire that we know achieved staggering prominence on 5 continents in only a decade.
That speed is just astonishing. It's hard to believe that such a foundational cultural change could be achieved in such a short period. We're not just looking at the beautiful clothes, we are charting his unexpected journey, the wartime compromises and triumphs that shaped him, and the incredible volume of influential design lines he produced year after year.
Exactly. To understand Dior, you have to appreciate the context. We'll be exploring not just what he designed, but the profound sociocultural why. He didn't just introduce a new style, he offered an antidote to the austerity of wartime rationing.
A release.
A total release, ushering in a dramatic, opulent femininity that the world was absolutely hungry for. We will trace his path chronologically from his early artistic passions, which are, I think, key to understanding his later geometry, to the full, complex evolution of his designs.
So let's start at the beginning. In Granville, Normandy, France, Christian Ernest Dior was born there on January 21st, 1905, the second of 5 children. And he was born into, well, considerable privilege.
A great deal of it. His father, Maurice Dior, was a prominent fertilizer manufacturer. Dior Frères was the family firm. The sources are clear that when the family moved to Paris when Christian was about 5, there was a specific elite trajectory laid out for him.
And that trajectory was certainly not fashion.
Yeah.
Not at all. The family intended for him to become a diplomat, preparing him for the highest levels of French society and politics. He even attended Sciences Po, an institution geared toward training the next generation of government elite. But his true passion lay entirely elsewhere, in the world of art.
This is a vital point to grasp because it sets him apart from so many other couturiers who began as, humble tailors or apprentices. Dior was an architect of silhouettes, not just a cutter of fabric, and that comes directly from his immersion in high art.
So after leaving school around 1928, he gets his father to subsidize him.
Right, and he opens a small art gallery.
This was a short-lived but massively influential interlude lasting only 3 years. The roster of artists he championed. I mean, it reads like a who's who of 20th century modernism.
Yeah.
We are talking about genuine artistic royalty. Pablo Picasso, Salvador Dali, Jean Cocteau, and Alberto Giacometti.
Being immersed in that world of cubism, surrealism, and abstract thought was formative. You can draw a straight line from that experience to his later work. His collections weren't just clothes, they were geometric studies, the A line, the H line, the vertical line.
So he's thinking conceptually.
He's thinking conceptually. He approached the female form with the same sensibility that Giacometti approached bronze, or Picasso approached a canvas. He learned how to manipulate perception, structure, and theme. It was his real education.
But this sophisticated artistic interlude ends very abruptly around 1931, the victim of, economic catastrophe.
It was a brutal confluence of personal and financial disasters. The gallery had to close due to the economic turmoil of the Great Depression, which hit Europe hard.
Wow.
And at the same time, the family faced tragedy.
He lost his mother and his brother.
And his father lost control of Dior Frères. The foundation of his early life it dissolved.
He went from curating masterpieces to suddenly having absolutely zero financial safety net. The sheer pivot he was forced to make is astounding. He had to generate income immediately, which meant using his artistic skills in the most accessible way possible, creating and selling fashion sketches.
He was selling these sketches outside his house for an almost impossibly low price. The record shows about 10 cents each,
10 cents.
which adjusts to roughly $2 today. This detail really drives home how desperate his situation was, trading high art for commercial survival. But ironically, these commercial sketches were the true entry point into the industry he would conquer.
And the quality of those necessity-driven sketches eventually caught the eye of a true fashion veteran, Robert Piguet.
Yes, Dior joined Piguet in 1937, where he designed for 3 collections. He deeply credited this mentorship, noting that Piguet taught him the virtues of simplicity through which true elegance must come.
And that lesson, simplicity as the foundation of elegance, is sometimes forgotten when we think of the later New Look extravagance, but it was fundamental to his early success.
Absolutely. And he tasted success quickly at Piguet. His Café Anglais, a day dress featuring a short, full skirt, was highly praised.
And you can see it there, can't you? That short full skirt is a shape that clearly anticipates his post-war revolution.
It's a direct precursor. This period was also crucial for networking. He worked side by side with Pierre Balmain at Piguet. And when Dior left for military service, he was succeeded by Marc Bohan.
And it's worth noting that Bohan later returned to head design for Christian Dior Paris in 1960.
The whole thing shows you that the entire Paris fashion world was a small, tight circle of eventual collaborators and, rivals.
Following his military service, the global crisis of World War II began. By 1942, Dior was employed at the celebrated fashion house of Yves Saint Laurent, working alongside Balmain as the primary designers. And this takes us into a deeply complicated historical moment.
It does. We have to address the difficult, necessary choices made by the Parisian couture industry during the Nazi occupation. Dior, working at Lalonde, just like houses such as Jean Patou, Nina Ricci, and Jean Lanvin, designed dresses for the wives of Nazi officers and French collaborators. This is simply part of the historical record of what it took to keep the houses open.
And to understand that context, we have to recognize the argument being made at the time for survival. The sources highlight that keeping the French fashion industry alive was seen as critical for maintaining both the national economy and, perhaps more importantly, the cultural prestige of Paris.
There was a constant, real worry that the Nazis would forcibly move the entire industry to Berlin or Vienna.
Which would have been a devastating blow to French identity.
A cultural catastrophe. The cost-benefit analysis at the time was extraordinarily harsh. One source references the calculation. The export of a single dress by a major couturier could buy 10 tons of coal, which was desperately needed for heating and power during the war.
So for the designers involved, it was a morally ambiguous professional compromise.
A compromise made in the service of national economic survival and cultural protection. They felt they had to continue the art form even if the clients were morally compromised.
And while Dior himself was navigating those professional compromises to keep the industry afloat, his family was involved in direct, active resistance. This brings us to his sister, Catherine Dior.
Catherine Dior, born in 1917, was a member of the French resistance, fighting for the liberation of France. Her capture by the Gestapo, it resulted in immense personal tragedy. She was sent to the notorious Ravensbrück concentration camp.
Her suffering was profound and endured for a long time. She remained incarcerated, subject to the horrors of the camp, until she was finally liberated in May 1945. It's impossible to overstate the trauma and pain she must have gone through.
Her courage and her sacrifice during that terrifying period, it deserves immense recognition and respect.
It truly does.
And that distinction between Christian Dior's professional survival and Catherine's personal resistance is essential to appreciating the full context of the family. 2 years later, when Christian Dior launched his defining first perfume in 1947, he gave it the name Miss Dior.
A direct tribute.
A direct, profound tribute to his sister, connecting the future world of luxury he was creating with the stark reality of survival and heroism.
So the transition from Dior the designer to Dior the founder began in 1946. This is when the highly successful textile industrialist Marcel Boussac offered him comprehensive financial backing.
Boussac initially wanted Dior to revive one of his older, stagnant brands, Philippe et Gaston. But Dior refused, showing his conviction early on. He insisted on a clean slate and a house bearing his own name, which led to the founding of Maison Christian Dior.
And he secured an incredible deal. 6 million francs in funding, exclusive control over the creative direction, and a guaranteed third of all profits. But here's the detail that makes the story so unique. The sources make clear that he only accepted this massive, life-changing business offer after receiving explicit approval from not one, but 2 separate clairvoyants.
It is the fascinating contradiction at the heart of the man, the shrewd, capable businessman who was deeply, personally superstitious.
Right.
He consulted his astrologer constantly before making major decisions, and he never went anywhere without a cluster of lucky charms. His reliance on spiritual guidance for a multi-million-franc venture shows how deeply interwoven intuition and belief were with his professional judgment.
The result of this blend of business acumen and spiritual guidance arrived on February 12, 1947. He called his debut collection Corolle, meaning circlet of flower petals. It featured 90 distinct garments.
The impact was instantaneous and global. It was Carmel Snow, the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, who witnessed the show and instantly declared it the new look.
And the name just stuck forever.
Forever.
Let's break down precisely what defined the new look silhouette, because it was a deliberate, total reversal of everything that had come before.
It really was. It featured rounded shoulders, a dramatically cinched waist, often achieved with corsetry and internal structure, and a very full, voluminous skirt. It was ultra-feminine, focused on curves, and utterly lavish.
And the visual shot came entirely from the contrast with the preceding era.
Entirely.
Right.
Remember, Paris had just emerged from 6 years of war where fabric rationing was strictly enforced, clothes were boxy, utilitarian, short, and minimal. Dior's new look was a spectacular display of wastefulness and luxury.
Wastefulness is the right word.
It utilized voluptuous shapes and often required 20 yards or more of fabric per dress to achieve that dramatic fullness.
And this opulence wasn't universally embraced, was it? We talk about it as a revolution, but many people saw it as decadent and even offensive so soon after the war.
You're absolutely right to challenge that initial reception. While the fashion elite loved it, there were protests, particularly in the United States, against the perceived wastefulness. Women felt they were being forced back into restrictive, impractical clothing, and the sight of these extravagant skirts was insulting to those who were still strictly saving resources.
So Dior had to defend this.
He had to defend this opulence by arguing it was a necessary return to French cultural artistry and a celebration of peace, a conscious rejection of austerity, a statement that the world was allowed to be beautiful and lavish again.
Now, speaking of the specific structure of the Carole line, there is a fascinating detail about the newness itself.
Yes, the sources provide important nuance here. While the impact was revolutionary, the style itself wasn't entirely novel. The Carole line drew heavily from and refined styles already glimpsed in the late 1930s.
And even earlier.
And even the restrictive, highly structured fashion of the Edwardian era. Dior didn't invent the full skirt. He maximized and crystallized a historical desire for opulence, turning it into a commercial phenomenon.
And we must acknowledge the essential contribution of a young Pierre Cardin to this defining moment.
Absolutely. Pierre Cardin was the head of Dior's tailoring atelier for the first 3 pivotal years. He was the one executing the structure and tailoring of these complex designs. The iconic 1947 bar suit, which remains the symbol of the new look.
The cream jacket, the black pleated skirt.
That one. It was actually designed by Cardin. This illustrates that Dior was not just a designer, he was a brilliant artistic director who assembled unparalleled talent from day one.
So the new look establishes Paris again as the global fashion capital, and instantly makes Dior the virtual arbiter of fashion for the entire decade that followed. He was celebrated for articulating a profound cultural desire.
And his philosophy, it went beyond just clothing. Dior believed fashion was an art form and an act of faith, essential for preserving French cultural heritage and, as he put it, restoring mystery and beauty to a war-weary society.
He wasn't just selling a garment, he was selling a piece of national pride and recovery.
Exactly, and his business genius was immediately apparent in the way he structured his creative output. He didn't just have seasonal collections. He launched a distinctly titled line every single season, consistently moving the silhouette forward. This ensured perpetual media attention and kept the house constantly fresh in the public eye.
So let's try and group these lines just to make the evolution a bit clearer for everyone listening. Maybe we can look at the early years, say 1948 to 1951, as the structured years, where he's exploring how to modify that extreme hourglass shape of the new look.
That's a great way to frame it. So in 1948, we see his fascination with dimension. He launched the Envol line, which superimposed angles of fullness onto a thin sheath, putting major emphasis on back interest. It was structural, almost architectural in its complexity.
And then his autumn line that year was the Cyclone Zigzag line,
which played entirely on asymmetry. You see the influence of that gallery time here, using oblique and diagonal lines to create visual tension and movement, demonstrating his mastery of three-dimensional form.
Moving in 1949, he introduced 2 highly conceptual lines, the trompe l'oeil and the mid-century. And trompe l'oeil literally deceived the eye is where his background in abstract art really translated commercially.
Absolutely. The skirts featured flying panels and pleats that lay flat when standing still, maintaining a slender line, but gave the illusion of dramatic, complex fullness when the wearer moved.
An optical illusion in fabric.
Precisely. The mid-century line was a slightly more restrained echo of the new look. Softly bloused tops, tiny belts, and pencil skirts, a contained elegance designed for a professional world.
By 1950, he was moving into pure geometry, challenging his own foundation. The vertical line aimed for a straight, smooth line from shoulder to hip, a subtle but definite move away from the hyper-cinched waist.
And he immediately balanced that with the autumn oblique line, returning to asymmetry with slanted necklines and bodices. The seams spiraled around the body, and stoles were often cut in one piece with the jacket to achieve a powerful diagonal flow. This constant self-correction structure, followed by fluidity, vertical followed by oblique, is key to his decade of dominance.
The year 1951 brought back softer shapes with the oval line. This collection smoothed and rounded every edge, shoulders, sleeves, and hips, rejecting sharp corners for gentle curves. And he introduced that snug, rounded bolero jacket that stopped just below the bust.
The oval was paired with the long princess line, which was groundbreaking because it was his first collection that did away with stiffened and padded underlinings. It fitted the body through the midriff, but left the waist unmarked.
So how did he create the shape?
The high waist solution was created with short boleros or high-placed half belts across the back. He was finding ways to maintain femininity without the restrictive architecture of the new look.
Okay, let's move to the second phase, what we can call the radical shift to fluidity, which really takes hold from 1952 onwards.
A perfect description. In 1952, we saw the sinuous line, focusing on fluid clothes that moved with the body. This is where he developed the very relaxed sweater look, a soft cardigan jacket, simple top, and a gentle skirt. It was a step toward ease.
But that ease was contrasted by the false profile A-line.
Yes, this was simpler but sharply tailored, designed to outline the body. He went so far as to invent a skirt constructed to jut out over the hips, creating distinct angular points at the front and back. A bold architectural statement that required precise engineering.
And 1953 saw the return of structure but shifted upward with the tulip line.
Right. This re-emphasized the upper body, sometimes reintroducing padding over the bust and rounding out the shoulders into petal shapes, drawing from that floral imagery of the Carole debut.
The Vivanta Cupola line gave the media its headline, a 2-inch rise in the hemline, signaling a break from the floor-grazing opulence of the early new look. He also featured barrel-shaped coats with dramatically rounded shoulders and ball skirts,
compensating for the shorter hem by raising the bust line to maintain an illusion of length. Always thinking about proportion.
Now we arrive at the critical years, 1954 and 1955, where Dior fundamentally repudiated his own initial creation. First came the relaxed 1954 Muguet Lily of the Valley line.
Relaxed suits, pleated skirts, and a less emphasized waist. It was a gentle step away.
But the real bombshell was the H-line. This was his most radical philosophical statement yet. He sought the tapering figure of a young girl, deliberately flattening the bust and increasing the distance between the bust and the hip. It aimed for a straight, columnar silhouette.
This was a direct, definitive move away from the hourglass, predicting the coming obsession with youth culture.
The H-line paved the way for the commercially massive success of 1955, the A-line.
Flaring dramatically from narrow shoulders and a wide triangle, sometimes stiffened at the hem, this was a complete U-turn from the original new look. It was sleek, modern, and almost entirely waistless. He also presented the Y-line that year, focusing on a top-heavy look over a slender body, often using long, waistless tunics with deep side slits.
By 1956, the silhouettes were high and straight. We had the Fleschero F-line, characterized by a high waistline. Jackets were often cut off above the waist to show the belt of the dress underneath.
Or loose jackets were belted well above the natural waist over slim skirts. And he also referenced history again with the Edwardian-influenced Aim at Magnet line, where daytime suits returned to a severe, long length reminiscent of early 20th century formality. This shows Dior was continually looking backward for inspiration while moving forward conceptually.
And his final lines in 1957 clearly set the stage for the 1960s revolution. The labor-free line was based on highly casual, relaxed items, like the fisherman's smock and the khaki boot jacket.
Most importantly, his very last line was the Fuso Spindle line. This cemented his final design direction. The waistless shift or chemise dress that tapered toward the hem. This relaxed look completely abandoned the waist and provided the final movement away from the highly structured new look, directly influencing the next generation of designers.
Now, we need to address the missing piece that explains how this dizzying pace of design evolution was funded: the business of Dior. The sources talk about a global empire on 5 continents, and that wasn't built just on selling expensive couture dresses.
That's absolutely critical. Haute couture, by definition, is a loss leader. The high cost of materials, the number of seamstresses, and the sheer volume of fabric used meant that the fashion house itself was barely profitable, if at all.
So where did the money come from?
The genius of Christian Dior and the true meaning of that global empire was the creation of a revolutionary, aggressive, and highly controlled licensing strategy.
He understood immediately that the name Dior was the real product, not just the dress. This was a radical shift in the industry. Prior to Dior, licensing was often seen as tacky or cheapening the brand.
He turned it into a massive, meticulously managed revenue stream. By the time of his death, over 50% of the company's revenues came from licensed goods. Dior was the first designer to globally license his name for accessories. This included everything from furs and hats to gloves, stockings, ties, costume jewelry, and shoes.
This accessory stream provided the financial engine that allowed the couture house to operate at an artistic rather than merely commercial level. The sources confirmed that this licensing strategy was what guaranteed the luxury and the volume of material used in the fashion lines.
The profit margins on items like silk stockings or ties bearing the Dior label were immense, and they allowed millions of people globally to buy into the aspirational lifestyle of the new look, even if they couldn't afford a tailored suit. This created instant worldwide brand recognition that far exceeded any rival house.
And we must return to Ms. Dior from 1947. That fragrance, his tribute to his sister, was not just a touching gesture, it was a massive commercial driver.
It was a pillar of the empire. Perfume became the second major pillar of his business. It took the brand from Paris to 5 continents, quickly becoming a powerful symbol of French luxury accessible to a middle-class consumer. His perfume business quickly outsold all other fragrance competitors combined, generating the immense capital needed for expansion.
So this combination, constant revolutionary design lines driving media attention, and a highly aggressive licensing model monetizing that fame through accessories and perfume. That's the real story of the global empire built in a decade.
And the sheer pace of this success meant that Dior had to think about continuity very early. Recognizing the toll the constant production took, in 1955, he brought in a 19-year-old talent, Yves Saint Laurent.
A very strategic appointment. The sources confirm that in 1957, Dior told Saint Laurent's mother, rather prophetically, that he had chosen the young man to succeed him. It's noted that she was confused by the comment, as Dior was only 52 and seemed to be at the peak of his career.
That confusion tragically lasted only a short time. Christian Dior died very suddenly on October 24, 1957, at the age of 52. He was vacationing in Montecatini, Italy, when he suffered a third heart attack,
Collapsing while playing a game of cards in the late afternoon.
It was a massive shock to the world. A man who had so intensely dominated global style for a decade was suddenly gone. He was survived by his partner, Jacques Benita, a North African singer 3 decades his junior.
His legacy was already monumental, extending beyond the commercial into the cultural and political spheres.
It was. The French government recognized his immense contribution to restoring national morale and prestige, awarding him the French Legion of Honor in 1950.
And his house maintained a strong presence in culture beyond the runway. The design house was nominated for major accolades in costume design. Dior himself received an Academy Award nomination for Best Costume Design in Black and White in 1955 for the film Terminal Station.
Following his death, the influence of the house continued seamlessly, which is a testament to the business structure he built. Yves Saint Laurent, the young successor, immediately took the reins and launched the revolutionary trapeze line in 1958.
The trapeze line, which utilized a wide, swinging silhouette, completely eliminated the waist. It was the definitive fulfillment of the design direction Dior had been steering toward with his final collection, the Fuseau line.
It liberated women entirely from the structured architecture of the new look, paving the way for the youth-focused, fluid styles of the 1960s.
This quick, successful succession demonstrates that Dior was not just a genius designer, but a visionary business leader who planned for the future, ensuring his house would survive and thrive even after his sudden departure.
It's truly remarkable to look back at the intensity of Christian Dior's career. In a mere 11 years, he managed to pivot from artistic failure to fashion dominance, fundamentally redefine femininity for the post-war world, restore French cultural confidence, and build a lasting global empire powered by groundbreaking licensing strategies.
His professional life spanned such extremes, from selling sketches for $2, navigating the moral complexities of working under occupation, to becoming the architect of the most celebrated fashion movement of the 20th century.
He was a man of immense contradictions, a spiritual visionary who was also a ruthless and brilliant commercial strategist.
As we reflect on this journey, let's return to the contrast that defined his life. We started by discussing his deep roots in abstract fine art, surrounded by masters like Picasso, Dali, and Cocteau. His work in the gallery focused on challenging visual norms and playing with perception. The question we leave you with is, how did that abstract sensibility translate into the highly structured, almost architectural reality of his couture lines?
It's a great question.
Think of the geometric, pure logic of the A-line or the vertical line. How did the chaos and challenge of surrealism manifest in the rigid, beautiful order of haute couture? It's a compelling thought experiment on the translation of artistic vision into tangible form.
A fascinating thread to pull on further.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth exploration into the foundational elegance and unexpected geometry of Christian Dior's legacy.
Thanks for listening.